Mm-hmm. You're live?
We are live. Twitch says we're having a hard time going through. And here we go. So, welcome. As you may notice, today's show, we have a very different co-host. This is not Bambos Demetriou Charles. And who is this? Please announce yourself, because I have such a hard time saying your last name.
I'm Mariana Kuchang.
Kuchang. I love this Kuchang.
Kuchang.
Mariana is here joining us today for our special guest. And I was going to, she just got on and I mispronounced her last name 20 times. I'm going to call it Serene because it takes me to serenity. And I really do believe that that's exactly what I feel like when I'm with this woman. We have a very special guest today. This guest has written several books. The titles alone are enough to make me cringe, just knowing there's going to be people out there that react aggressively to it. Phyllis Serene is on the show today. We are very excited, and welcome to A Wonderful Chaos. So as we said today, we've got Phyllis on, and I met Phyllis, I believe I met Phyllis, I guess about a year ago. We met through a mutual friend called Gino Yu, and Gino's a kind of crazy individual that just match makes. He travels the world, makes friends all over, and then says you should meet each other. And we sat around and we had a talk, and then Phyllis was the male version of me. And I kind of looked at her like, or the female version of me. Sorry.
Yeah,
I was the male version of her. and somehow I looked at it as like, wow, someone who's me, who's not me, a totally different background, a totally different life in a lot of ways. And then as she spoke, I saw she was me, but she pushed the boundaries further than me. And that was really saying something, because I'm pretty much the provocateur of provocateurs. And then I realized I do play within the rules, because I have this thing on my face that's called white. And I have this idea that sometimes people think, wow, he really can only say that because he's white. Like I do have that feeling, there's a feeling like, wow, there's an idea of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And then we get into identity and then people get stuck. And I could try to coach and mentor people there, but I'm like, you know what? I don't have the time or energy to do that. And Phyllis, on the other side, is someone who has totally pushed that limit. And she's gone to degrees that I can feel my skin as I'm vibrating right now with Phyllis coming on. There's so many things. I even chose a picture that was going to be more appropriate for Phyllis on our green screen, because I thought, yeah, whatever we're doing, we're going to do it wild today. So without further ado, we're going to welcome her on.
Yes.
Here we go. This is Phyllis. Phyllis, can you please tell me how to pronounce your last name?
Serene. Don't overcomplicate it. Just Serene.
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 Beautiful
Serene
name.
was my dominatrix name. It was Mistress Serene. So when I came out of the kink closet to the vanilla life, I kept my last name because I was like, I'm not ashamed of either one of them. You need to know both.
I love it, because I was a bit worried that we might go directly into your new state of the oracle work. And I'm like, do I get to get into the sex? Because the sex actually is very exciting for me. And I was thinking maybe we can go there before we go to the oracle.
Okay.
She's told me some stuff that has blown my mind. Now, of course, I didn't give in the intro that, and I don't even know if it's correct what I'm going to say, but let's just for the moment correct me where I'm wrong. You lived as a nun for a portion of your life. Is that correct, or am I missing something there?
Missionary, not Catholic. I was raised Catholic. Then had the 70s to party. In 1980, became a born-again missionary, a born-againer. and then a missionary later on, and did that for 12 years and just went, there's some problems with this story, and retired from that Christian belief system.
Yeah.
And then said, okay, what's going on in the world? And went back to, looking at sexuality and realized, from 1980 to 1992, we had AIDS. And a lot of my friends died. And it was a nice protection space for me to be in while I was doing other research. But in coming out in 1992, people were still having sex. They just talked even less about it. And it was a sad space, really. And what I found from the BDSM world, which I had really learned about as a very early child, was that people learned how to negotiate and communicate their desires in a much more clear-cut manner. And so that was a more comfortable space for me to operate in. And so I said, well, okay, yes, I do want to be spanked, and I do not want an orgasm. I do not want you to touch my vagina. It's very clear and very rules oriented. So we respect that kind of behavior. And so that was a comfortable space to be back in. And so then I was still in my vanilla work life, was still a missionary like, I was environmental, I was entrepreneurial education, I was a do-gooder, for Habitat for Humanity and Keep America Beautiful, those kind of nonprofits. So I didn't work professionally. This was just my private life, and I could be Marion the librarian during the day and the she-devil at night. That was kind of fun to play both sides. So I had that experience, and then when I survived cancer a couple times. This is my fourth round with it now, and but after you go through that, you go, what am I hiding for? What am I doing that game for? And so I moved to California and said, let's go out and enjoy some good times in LA, because they had better dungeons and better play scenes. So I enjoyed my life there, and then decided to write. Went back to grad school and did my fifth book, which was on All My Heroes Were Hoes, Life Lessons from the Dungeon. I just had fun with it. Just had fun. So that's been the quick story of what's been going on with me.
Yeah, I mean, the title, All My Heroes Were Hoes. I mean, I saw that before, I saw that a while ago when I first, when we first interacted. And I just thought, my God, what an incredible title for a book.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And it really was. And it was just looking at and it's a collection of short stories, that book. And it's looking at women who use their sexuality for good. Amata Hari, Josephine Baker, Catherine the Great. I'm like, these girls knew exactly what they were doing and paid the price in some regards, in all the regards, and especially, the stories that are told after their lives, and the yellow journalism spin, I like to say, on it. But Polly Adler, who was one of my early heroes, and my father introduced me to her at a very young age, and she was the lady in red in Chicago, if you remember any of the gangland murder stories in Chicago. She was a madam that the mob had put her up into business, and she was professional, madam for 20 some years, retired, went to college, wrote her book, and that was her retirement income. I'm like, sex, drugs, and all the cool stuff. I'm like, oh, that's a career woman.
Every time Phyllis posts, I cringe.
Wow.
When I comment on your post every time, right? Every so often, you do something that you have a group that obviously understands you now, right? But I'm living with this group of millennials around me who basically have a belief system that's so contrary to everything that you actually stand for. So, and me, I don't cringe because I can completely connect. That's the way I would think and write. But I would almost never feel comfortable enough to write it, knowing the reaction that I often, at least I've experienced in my own life.
Interesting, ages. We all came up in different times. And so having this experience now and being able to go, because I would say my audience, a lot of millennials, because it's like, yeah, you can have that freedom. And you had the freedom early on. And I went, well, what I got lucky. two regards. One, I'm a Sagittarian and I'm a golden pig in the Chinese astrology, the two luckiest signs. I'm like, and as astrologer said to me, if you could handpick your charts, you've done it. I'm like, yes, that would be something I would do. So that would be that. And secondly, really being able to be radically honest and learning how to conquer fear early on in life was really the best lessons I got in my life, in my childhood. And I've had the practice of that. And so it's like, okay, once you get past fear, game on, baby, game on. So, you will push envelopes because, as my 93-year-old auntie said to me, you've done what most people cannot because of fear has held them back. And I went, thank you. That was a gift. I'm grateful for a family that, my first pacifier literally was a passport. So, I mean, I've been traveling all my life. And so it's not like that's going to hold me back. It was just like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because, of course, this topic is just very exciting. And I think you mentioned that it's possible to heal through sexuality. And and you used it as a profession as well. That's healing, right? So I just wondered that. What do you think that? So what was the healing in that process? And then also we could talk about what we could do.
Sure.
In general.
Let's talk about the different types of healing, first of all. People usually think about sexual healing and they go, I can't orgasm. And I'm like, okay, well, that could be technical, that could be emotional, that could be libido, it could be a lot of different technical things in that regard. Emotional healing, and particularly if there's a rape or those kind of issues, that ain't gonna happen from somebody rubbing you right. You're gonna have to go somewhere else and work on that kind of piece. And what I've learned, our biggest issue as humans is that we don't have any intimate communication skills. We don't know how to talk about sex. We can drink, we can fall into bed, and then we, ooh, did that work out? Does he like me? And I'm like, probably not. Probably not. You went too fast. You screwed that one up. I'm like, no, there's a process here. Here's what we call dating for a reason. And then for the but let me go to the physical, because we do have physical damage. More men have physical damage than women do. So let's talk about that first of all. Men have been sexually abused and ignored, and their abuse has not been addressed at all. And one of the things I talk about in my book, Owning Masculinity, Undressing the Sexual Abuse of the Masculine, is that talked about trauma. And the one chapter I call is called 1/3 of Men. And this is 1/3 of men who have suffered sexual abuse from circumcision. And we don't think of that as an abuse. Our cultures, our religions have said, no, it's natural, it's good, it's clean, it'll prevent HIV. But I'm like, no, it doesn't.
No.
It had nothing to do with HIV. They just made it up so they can make some more money off of it. But it's ritual. It's a blood ritual, it's a business practice because it's a moneymaker for a lot of companies, and this is not a good thing. But what it does damage to the body, when you do trauma to a body, the earlier you do the trauma, the more damning it is, and you don't even know you've been traumatized. And the issue really that comes up is there's like 17 different medical issues that happen to a body because of this piece of skin that for a full-grown adult can be up to 11 inches that is removed from the body. But snip, snip without any anesthesia. If you happen to ever catch the visual of watching it, and there's a great documentary called American Circumcision that will, in the European version, show you the whole thing. It'll make you really cringe. I mean, this will make you cry and go, oh my God, we are barbarians.
I'm already grabbing for my penis as we speak.
Good. Hold on to it, bro. Hold on to it. I know they're not snipped. But the trauma, and one of the traumas that I really want to address is alexithymia. And that is the inability to feel emotions. And that is, how cruel can you do to a person to remove their emotional ability to connect? And so women go, he doesn't understand me. He doesn't understand my feelings. And why can't he get me? It's because somebody damaged him and traumatized him and damaged the part of his heart that needs that connection. Now, yes, you can rebuild, and yes, you can heal, and it doesn't affect everyone the same way. But that's a serious damage to the body. And if you go into a relationship with this inability to communicate intimacy, you got a problem. And so you having to learn how to work through those kind of issues are really what I wanted to address and go, yeah, we got to pay attention to this. And I had looked at it as an academic, because I'd served on the Texas Board of Nursing, and I had the exposure at the time of looking at pedophilia and that damage. And that's why my book was kind of like just looking at those aspects. And when I looked at, okay, well, that starts and then that happened and that happened, then you go, oh, there's a pattern of abuse that men have suffered and have no voice. And I was told, as a woman, well, you can't start a men's group. You got to stay in your lane.
Yeah.
That's it. Tell a Dom to stay in my lane.
Yeah.
Give me a break, please.
One of the most fascinating things you told me when we sat together was that you were paid to watch people have sex and then give them comments on what you saw.
Right. Yeah, those are kind of funny.
Wow. Very special service.
That's a very special service. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world because
it
in
does.
some ways, but then again, who would be offering such a service,
Well, it's nice to be asked.
And
it's usually ego that is the first thing. Can watch our performance? Can we do porn? Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, you can do porn. You're gymnastic and aerobic. But the first thing I asked at the end of the session was, I turned to the woman and I said, "Did you have an orgasm?" And she goes, "No." I'm like, oh. Fail.
Yeah,
that's what we call a fail, because it's a show. But so what? I don't. Okay, what else you got?
It's really a taboo. I also noticed it in my. I'm doing couples therapy, and the biggest taboo, money is one of the taboos, right? And the other one is sexuality. And it's so crazy that how come that you cannot talk about sexuality with the person who you are doing it with? And most of the couples don't talk about sex.
I know.
And of course, the more they talk about it, the better it is.
Of course.
So yeah, it's
expectations aren't met, and unfortunately, women tend to take a passive aggressive, and our belief system is built on fantasy of movies, and that screws us up left and right. And men will be willing to buy the cow, buy into marriage because you get guaranteed sex.
Yeah.
And women will buy into sex as I get a guaranteed house, roof over my head. But then we manipulate and use the sex as a bargaining tool, and we hold it back. And then there goes the marriage. And I'm like, well, did y'all talk about that before you get engaged like that? No, we didn't think about that. We just thought it would be happy ever after, just like in the movies. Because where does the movie end? At the marriage. Right?
Exactly. We don't By the way, we do have questions coming in that we don't see on our screen, but we do see them on the phone. So we'll look down at the phone and read them to you.
Sure.
You want to read them?
Yeah. Ina is asking, how does someone develop luxophilia, inability to connect? Is that only through physical abuse?
It's through circumcision.
Okay.
Yeah. You're cutting off the most sensitive. It's like cutting off your clitoris, your hood or your clitoris. You'd have the same problem. And
So
it is done to women. The Muslims that practice that do female circumcision or female mutilation and genitalia, which, everybody when the UN wants to fight against, but they let the men go. So like, same thing, same part.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it dulls that, it kills your heart. It really damages your heart.
How would you heal that? Like, is that possible to heal such a thing?
Yeah,
That's my question.
It's a conscious effort. It's like if you have a limb, if you have an arm removed, you learn how to work around it. So you have to develop. And, when you're asking earlier about, how do you teach about sexuality? And there are some sexual therapists that I know, especially for paraplegics, that learn you can do an orgasm just from, rubbing this. So you can retrain the brain. That's the easily programmable piece of this. But it takes work. You have to realize you've been traumatized, and then you go from there and you develop from there.
You have another question?
Yes. How about tantric practices, where the first thing we learn is to abstain from orgasming, and where we learn other forms of orgasm?
Interesting.
Sure. I like to look at the tantric. I kind of look at sexuality in different levels. So level 1 is your own awareness, having your own orgasm, being able to masturbate yourself. Level 2 is being able to share with a partner and develop intimacy and mutual satisfaction. Level 3 is exploration. That could be BDSM, the fetish world, or polyamory, those kind of swinging, those kind of things. And then level 4 is using sexuality in a spiritual well, being able to take the energy of sexuality and developing. So separating the orgasm from the act is part of that, because people go, oh, it's just this 1, 2, 3, boom, orgasm, we're done. It's like, no, there's a whole lot going on in between. And if you learn how to use this energy, because this is the energy that creates life, right? This is the biggie, as we like to say. And so Tantra has a skill set of that. Now, the problem, with most of us that understand Western Tantra, we used to call it California Tantra, it was just about the sex.
Yeah.
And Tantra is really just about, you give 110% of everything you do. Everything you do at 110%. So of course, sexuality gets that same spin. And then, so yes, the best sex I've ever had is tantric sex. However, the most engaged sex I've ever had has been also, okay, that's taking it a lot further than I thought it could go. And if you're not prepared for it, it's overwhelming. And you do it carelessly, you get in trouble.
I was going to say, I've always had the impression like there's always these big wells of movements in the world, and of course the tantric movement is one of these wells that's come out the last years. And I always find it interesting is that how we move from this is now a new exercise, and there's like the lesson you could have learned in between all 0 to 100 isn't learned, but we go to 100 as if you can jump right to the end and have all of that experience without having the base to get there.
Yeah. And it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And can be quite addictive, but then you don't grow with it. You kind of get lopsided in your perspective of life.
Yeah. It would be like any belief, which all of a sudden becomes so grounded that you no longer can see past it, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched your video where you talked about the oracle work. And if there isn't anyone that has already seen the video, then they have to at least go to the page. There's 2 pages. You have Phyllis Rowley. Is that right on that one?
Yeah, Phyllis Rowley. Yeah, it's my real name. Rowley.
Real name.
The Irish.
And then there's the goddess page as well, which anyone who looks for your name will find those 2 groups.
Right. On YouTube,
Yeah, on YouTube as well. And when I watched, I hadn't seen it before, maybe 10 minutes before we came on, like your video, it became apparent to me why I love you so much, because everything you were saying was like, oh, these are all the things that I've also been experiencing, but I never knew that they were coming out of your mouth. So when I went with my mentor Case to see The Matrix, we left The Matrix and he looked like almost like his skin, everything was white. And he's like, Andy, somebody else sees it. Like somebody else sees it. Like you couldn't have put
mhm,
that together unless there was someone who had the sensibility to see, wow, this is all just a projection, and we're all living in this own reality that we actually take so seriously.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
and then when
Yeah, yeah.
and then I saw, this Sophia Stewart woman who wrote it. It was just what an incredible. I didn't even realize that she was this wonderful Black woman. I assume in L.A., because that seems like everyone needs to be in L.A. to sell the ideas that they have in their heads.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a wild story. I mean, in 2013, I was minding my own business in Beverly Hills, and I was a writer and actress and doing the thing. And I'd seen the movies, and never really paid attention to them. And just when you're doing the on your phone and texting away, and the message comes up, and I'm typing NE something, and the word matrix comes up, I'm like, how'd you get NE from N? And I sat and looked at it, and I went, okay, somebody trying to tell me something. So let me go look this up. And I looked up Sophia Stewart. I
Yeah.
contacted her and tried to interview her and said, I want to know your story. Now, at the time, she was in the very legal battle trying to get the money because she didn't get paid for the show. Now, since then, I don't want to get into her story too much. There's another guy who's come out and said, no, I wrote it. So I'm just like, okay. I'm not really interested in the financial. I'm interested, what is your story? And so it was a rabbit hole for me, and I just went down it. And I went to an Oracle school online, and then when I started traveling, I went to Greece and I went to Delphi, and I said, let me see what these girls were doing and what was that role. And there were then the Sibyls in Africa, the same kind of work. And it was young women who did it initially. And basically, there was a crack in a fissure in a rock in the mountains of Delphi. These girls would get up on this really tall stool. It was like 8 feet tall, and this gas would come out. It was an ethylene type of gas, like a laughing gas. They'd get high, and they'd start prophesying. But it only worked once a month. The crack only came up once a month. So all these kings and leaders would come and go, I want to see what the oracle says, and they'd come on the wrong day, and they'd be pissed. And then they start raping the young girls. So then they started getting the older women to do it. And it really built the town until there was an earthquake. And it was like, oh, we're out of business. Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting going, okay, I see what you're doing. And they needed the priests to interpret. And so because, you're getting high. You're going, okay, yeah, they're coming. And Greece is one of those places that Greece is a very unique spot on the planet because you can see the way the island or the isthmus is set up. And this is before the canal was built. You could see warring ships coming at each other. So you could easily prophesy. I also went to the temple of Aphrodite, who was a famous madam at the time. And she had a great spot. She had a great view, too. And her little space is not bigger than your apartment, Andy. I mean, your living room. It's really a small space. But her ability to see stuff and prophesy stuff. These are working women, and the town that Aphrodite is in, I can't remember the name of it, is like Beverly Hills. When I went back there, I felt like I was back in Beverly Hills. I was like the feel of the place, and so I was recognizing, okay, there's a story Matrix got me into. There's a history, and then there was the calling that said, well, what are you doing? What are you here to do? Because the role of the oracles is to know, or the motto, that was on the wall above the kitchen, know thyself.
Yeah.
And so my tag has been know thyself more. And my work has been, well, let's look at what I call life maps. There's over 40 different astrological and psychometric systems. Psychometrics is Myers-Briggs, Strong's, that's what we call, okay, they're tools so we can understand each other. And then we have the old and we have the ancient, the Mayan calendar, the Western astrology, and the Ayurvedic astrology. So looking at all of them, they all give you a little different aspect. It's like looking at a four-way mirror of your life. And, one of the things I've learned, I said, we were conscious before we were born, and we are conscious after we die. And the baby chooses the time to be born. We wait for the child. And so knowing that, there's like, okay, somebody made a choice. And as I said, in looking at my own charts, I made choices. And so I'm like, that's information I want to know. And so my work on my website was, let's just look at our charts. Let's look at our maps. Let's see what you chose for yourself. Because, we are, one of the things that we're a very warring planet. And the first thing that the winners of a war do, they burn libraries and they kill the librarians. So you don't get information. So the new winning army gets to set the new belief systems and the new doctrines.
Yep.
And so learning past information of who you are, what a cruel thing not to know your history, which has happened to all peoples who have been slaves or taken away from their cultures. You don't know who you are, and you're just kind of going along and doing that 9 to 5, trying to make a living. And I'm like, not fair. And that makes an angry Black woman, especially a dom, a little pissy.
What was interesting for me when I was in, I went to Catholic school, right? Dad was Jewish, mom was Catholic. And I swear to you, that school so indoctrinated so much shame. Like there was so much shame.
Of course.
Like when I was in 8th grade, I had my first girlfriend, and they basically talked about how much disease was spread through sexuality. So I was so uncomfortable. I wouldn't kiss her, but I would touch her boobs. Because that was like
dry.
That was like dry. I'm not going to contract anything that way. Like it's just, and even then I was a bit scared, right? Even then, like it took me years to feel like, I didn't know what was going on here, but they scared the living hell out of you. So that
this is a huge topic. I have plenty of clients who came out from Christianity, and they have really, they had a lot of shame, a lot of fear about sexuality. It's also an interesting topic.
That's how you control somebody.
That's what reminded me of when you were speaking just now, because basically the whole theme of somebody basically giving you a story that you don't even realize is coming from outside of you.
Yeah.
And then you basically start taking it on, not able to discern what's their story and what's true. And then you get stuck, obviously, until you do your own know thyself. Right. And then interestingly is almost break with that story, and often with the individuals that are part of that story as well. Right? Because in some ways, not conforming to that story also makes you a bit of a pariah.
Right. You can run out of
It's very hard to get out from that story. How do you get out from that story?
How do you get out?
You had a double dose of Jewish and Catholic guilt. I'm like, oh, baby, that's hard.
Yeah. But I mean, I didn't mind the Jewish guilt because the same reason you didn't mind the dominatrix is that a Jew, I can say, go fuck yourself. And somehow they won't resent you for it. It's like, that's your full expression, like you almost love them more through that full expression. But if you do that in the Catholic side, oh my God, you're not going to, there's a resentment that can go on for years. You won't talk to somebody because of that. So
won't get invited. No family dinners. You're kicked out.
Non grata.
It's very double.
Yeah. So in that sense, I always knew where I stood on the Jewish side of the family, and I felt loved even when I was aggressive.
Yeah. And I'm grateful for my Catholic upbringing because it gave me the backbone to challenge. Because my father instilled enough good sense into me. So when the priest told me, when I asked the question, first Holy Communion, I was kind of like, well, what if Eve didn't eat the apple first? How come you blaming Eve? And he goes, well, some other woman. And the guy was like, well, some other woman would have done it. I'm like, she's like,
good question.
You don't know the answer. And so that was always that kind of, okay, when someone gets angry at you for asking a difficult question.
Yes. That's when you know that you just got to run for the hills. That's like
when you know.
Then you know that you have a good question.
Yeah. We even had a sexual molester at the school. I went to one of those schools where we had the whole shift off. I got visited by the FBI. They came to the house one day to have that talk, right? My mom was like, the FBI is coming, and I'm like, well, what are they coming for? What did you do? She says, no, we're coming to talk to you. And basically, we had the sit down talk, which was how friendly was Father Warren with you? Did Father Warren touch you in ways that maybe were a little bit less appropriate than they should have been? And it was really and they shipped him away. Nothing happened to him. They sent him, and then he got sent to another parish. I mean, that's how little thought they gave to the well-being of the kids. Scary.
Wow.
Yeah. And once you know something, you cannot unknow.
Yep.
And that's the issue that we're all dealing with now. The pedophilia that's at this level now, that it's just been it's staining the rug. We can't sweep it under the rug anymore. It is staining the rug, and that abuse now. And what because I look at stats. Stats are a good way to lie, but it's a good way to just see trends of what's going on. And Pornhub is really good at collecting them. And one of the things, and Pornhub is also very guilty of selling and publishing child pornography, because I've seen it myself. Wow. And I look at the numbers. When a regular porn video may get 5,000 views, a child video will get 5 million views. So they're making too much money not to turn this down. And looking at the underground of this, a child sells for about 200 to 250,000 per child, and you can get 7 years out of a child at $200 a pop. You're making a lot of money at six or 7 times a day. So they're profitable. So you follow the money, you get it. You understand this process. So seeing this and the documentaries that are coming out about these things, you go, all right, it's not just 1 or 2 of the bad kids in the part of town. It's a whole lot of them. And Texas is the number 1 state in America that children are sold into trafficking. Wow. And internationally, this is not something anybody can say this is not happening in their country. It's everywhere because it's too much money.
I heard about this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. But it was interesting that they wanted to treat this with making animated films for pedophile people.
Well, so that's the number 2 category, anime, and that's the millennials. That's the millennials. They like anime, so thank God. I'm grateful. However, the breakdown is that their inability to that intimate communication thing again.
Yeah,
that ain't real, right? They lose something.
I've got a question around this whole thing. Like, I think I found that the older I've got, the more I've done my work, I've seen life in paradoxes. Like, it's just everything is a paradox. So when you speak and you'll talk about the kind of I'd almost call it the reaction to the suppression. So I would say when we look at the priest, or when we look at maybe Texas, places that have been highly ground in what they should not do. Like, I've often seen that the reaction to that suppression is the counter to that. So that paradox of, if it were just considered normal, then we wouldn't be reacting. There wouldn't be these kind of anomalies. What we see as anomalies, but are really to be expected from suppression of something from a young age.
Right. Yeah. What you suppress has got to get expressed somewhere.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't. And the child that's told sex is wrong, all their lives are still sexual beings. So what do they do? And one of the things interesting in my work with clients, I would do phone sex, but I go, when sex is a problem, then call me. When it's dominating your life and you can't get anything done, then call me. Let's talk about how we work through that and how to bring this into balance. And a lot of the, especially the child stuff and men who have been sexually abused by their mothers. And I just went, and didn't understand that was even abuse. They thought that was normal, that their mother would smother them sexually, shoving their faces into their vagina, thinking this is fun and everybody's having a good time. But this is a child who's going, love means being almost murdered and smothered to death. That's what love means. And this is a 1-year-old. people. These are babies who are traumatized and never get to talk about it. Never get to talk about it. And so you're going, oh, okay, where do we start with that, right? Where do we go? Look, your mama abused you. That let's call it what it is. First of all, let's be as honest as hell. And radical honesty is kind of the piece of my work that you can't deny. I don't call myself a therapist. I call myself a coach, because I'm not here to talk about 40 years of this problem. You know, I like Woody Allen, who was like 40 years with a therapist, and then he marries his daughter. I'm like, you need a refund because you didn't learn shit, bro. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
So
we're very similar in that regard. Like, I would never want anyone to see me as a therapist, because I'm almost like, if you have to see me that many times, I'm obviously not doing anything right. Like, if you have to spend more than a month with me, like, oh my God, this is really bad, you know?
Yeah, I can't do that. And I can tell you, like, you got to make some choices. And when you can pull the veil off of what you've been trying to hide and what you've been trying to work around and feel and deal with your own guilt, you know, when you can be really honest with that and go and draw the lines. What's your fault? What's not your fault? Well, ain't nobody your fault when you were a child. Nothing. And so you have, and then the guilt comes because they liked it or they got an erection, you know, and it's like, no, baby, you know, if you feed you will shit. Food has to go through. It's just part of the human body. So how someone manipulates you in that process is not your fault necessarily. Yeah.
I never really thought about it, because you're dealing with far more intense situations than I am. Like, I kind of, like, I'll often say that's above my pay grade. You know, like, I'll kind of let that, I'll stay with someone with death, no issue. Death, you know, it's like, I think to the degree you've made peace with something, you can totally be with someone that process. In some ways, you let go of whatever it is you might be. But when it comes to somebody that may have some sexual thing that I'm not quite sure what's really going on, and I'm just keeping space for it, like, I see that you going the depths of where you've gone means you have a hell of a lot of space for that discussion.
Yeah. It's what a process. And that's the interesting thing about being in the dominatrix world. It's really, you're a psychiatrist, period. You cannot spank someone to tears and watch them orgasm after then go, how'd that happens? You know, and go, okay, let's look at the wiring on that, shall we? And take that apart and look at that on many levels, you know. And I used to laugh at a guy who used to come to a dungeon in LA, and he goes, I just want to be tickled. And I'm like, that ain't kinky. He's like, go home. You know, and he goes, yeah, but I want it naked in front of a bunch of other people. I'm like, okay, you're in the club. Come on.
You're out. No, you're back in again. You're back in again.
All right. That's like you get the exhibitionist thing at it.
Did you find that people were willing to share what underlie, or were they even aware of what was underlying these fetishes or these fantasies, or was it just something that they felt like, this is just curious to me? Like,
yeah, many people don't. I mean, there's over 7,000 fetishes. You know, there's BBC did a documentary about the mechanical fetish, the guys who like to get off on cars. Did you see that?
Wow.
You know, tailpipes are their friends. You know?
No, really?
Really? Really got off on helicopters. You know, it was like, and you know. During the documentary, there were two guys they highlighted. After the documentary, 2,000 people joined the club, you know, so you kind of open up the doors. It's a Pandora's box. It's a Pandora's box.
Yeah.
And why is a mechanical thing unattractive? Because ain't no resistance. Resistance is futile. You know, you can express yourself without fear. So it's interesting.
Oh, wow.
Why, you know, how things get developed, and stories, heavens.
I know. I mean, those stories, you probably, like, they would go to some deep, dark places no one would be able to imagine. I could imagine. I don't want to even imagine how far those stories go. Wow.
But there's also something within you that draw you to this profession. So I'm just wondering, because most of the time when I'm healing people, then I feel like I'm healing my own wounds. So whatever comes on my path, I notice that there is something what I have to work with, or I used to work with, and I'm healing that part of me still through the process with my clients. So
yeah. And I would say my specialty is intimate communications, because that's, again, it's the languaging. I'm a writer. And one of the things I realized that I was doing to myself and to my partners, as far as trying to heal myself, I could say easily, we have a communication issue that is not allowing me to express my full neediness to emote to you. But I really needed to say, you hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And I could dance around language without being honest. And so my personal life has been working through that. How do I really honestly communicate? And my professional has been, well, let's play games and let's find different ways of doing this, and doing it in ways of expressing it to get to these levels of communication, because it's hard. On sex and versus BDSM, I say it's easy again to go, just let's get drunk and fall into bed. But in BDSM, it's a lot harder to say, tie me up. That's a level of trust that you gotta get to. And so getting there is a whole different approach to that, and a respect for yourself and your willingness to work with someone to go there with it. So I agree. I think whatever field we choose, and I've been a headhunter. I got 3 books on career planning and career tips in my early career. So I did executive recruiting. And so looking at jobs and why people choose jobs, we are trying to work out something in our life. And that's a great thing. It's a beautiful thing, because the world needs that. We figured it out. And so we are trying to give back. And that's a beautiful gift that we have on the planet, to be able to share that and make that happen.
Going to that executive, it's interesting is that sometimes, because I'll do that now, right? It isn't the full job, but someone says, Andy, we need you to look for the CEO, help us figure it out.
Right.
Or we need a sales manager or something. And I always laugh, because when I tell them the reasons why I might choose someone, they'll look at me like I'm a bit insane. Like how do you come to so if I'm looking at a salesperson and I'm like, oh, that salesperson's great because they weren't really loved by their father. And
yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean that's because all they're doing, every quarter, they're just looking for the approval of their father. And their father isn't there anymore. You're the guy who now they have to prove it to you. And if they don't meet the goal, and all of a sudden they feel like the love that they never got is not going to be given to them now either. And they always laugh and they're like, it's right, but how you can't say it like that. That's not you can't say it like that.
But that's why you hired me.
Yeah, exactly. That honesty, that level of honesty is why they hired you.
Exactly. Yeah. And as a headhunter myself, one of the things I learned is to read faces. And I learned that from an attorney who used it in jury selection. And I was quite the skeptic, but because it came from my professional organization, our annual meeting, they brought this guy in. I went, oh, you can read some of this stuff on people's faces, and you can see that shyness, or that that aggressiveness, or their narrow-mindedness, or that need to be right. You can see all of those things in the faces. Yeah,
and those little micro expressions that I often talk about, because my dad was very abusive, right? I lived with verbal abuse from a child, and what I noticed was that I was so scared that I would always look at anything that might set him off. So I looked at that face, and I see zoning in on that face, that's the thing that leads to the anger. That's the thing that leads to the distrust.
You can see the trigger.
I could see all those triggers, and of course, as a child, it's fear. So you don't realize that actually you're building skills until much later. And then it was, and I became a manager, and years later, the relationship healed with my own dad. And I called him to tell him to thank him for it. And it freaked him out, because in a way it was like he'd been blamed for everything. He was still bipolar. It was like you might have been poking the bear, but he actually completely acknowledged that. So it brought us even closer, which is quite absurd, even if you think about it. But
what a gift. congratulations to heal that, because I have the same as you. I'm the fourth child of a schizophrenic mother.
Wow.
And, and I remember there was that woman in Houston who drowned her 5 kids, and I'm like, it's the number 5 one that pushes them over the edge. So I'm like, I was grateful I was number 4, but you have to learn to discern very quickly sanity and clarity on a whole nother level. And that's a powerful skill. It's a powerful coping skill that you use in life, and you're not even conscious that you have it most of the time, but it served us well in our fields. So you get it too. I appreciate that. I'm like, yep, we can read them.
Would you learn survival? Like survival is the kind of that fundamental, like everything else is underneath that. So if you kind of build a way to survive as a child, then obviously that's an innate skill.
Yeah, and our culture that has given us what do we call that? 2-parent households or 1-parent households, and that's all we get. We don't have the tribe, we don't have the community, we don't have that mutual loving support from other groups, and so we're stuck with figuring this out. And I grew up in the age of Valium, and so that was mother's medicine, so it was like, okay, it's Valium time, we can all come out of the closet. She's mellowed out.
Yeah, I had the Valium time as well.
Right. So
unfortunately, we only had Valium time for a few weeks or months, and then he got so numb that he went off of it, and then we went back to the bipolar dad. So we had this calm dad who felt like a skeleton, and then he's like, I want to feel alive again, and then he obviously would see the drug, and then bang.
It was not better living through chemistry, but that's that's what Freud's nephew sold us on. So we got that commercial. We've come a long way, baby.
Haven't we just?
I just wonder that when you have a sexual trauma and you transcend that, then what can you learn from it as a teacher, or as something that you can be grateful for? I just wonder, when people go through that process, then maybe they learn that how many different ways there are for connection that I would never get to explore if I never had such a wound. Or I
think the first thing is to just be honest and own the victimhood. This shit happened to me.
Exactly. First,
this was wrong. It's like getting robbed of a car. This shit happened to me. Own it, but then don't wallow in it, because when you make the claim, I am a victim, over and over again, then you stay in victimhood.
You reinforce it.
I can't be touched here, because I'm always, I'm like, and I worked with other female sexologists that work with me. I want to help broken women. I'm like, ugh. So what a life. I don't want to have shop talk with you after dinner ever. I hear broken women's stories all day long, because that's what you become. And you take on that overwhelming. I'm like, no, language it. I'm healing from what we came out of. How do we relearn to adjust? That's the difference between the coach and the therapist. Therapists will wallow in it. That coach is like, no. All right, you're walking wrong. I was a race walking coach first. So it's like we correct the problem, and then we get better at what we want. And that's what you focus on. What do you want? You want to feel good about your body. So, okay, where do we start? Well, let's start with the body. Where do we need to relearn who we are and what we are? Because you don't have to talk about the abuse over and over again. Okay, it happened. Great, let's go. Now what?
There's something that you said that triggered me in terms of how I work, is that I'll often say that my job is to make you feel more miserable. Like someone will say, like, my job is to like make you feel so miserable that finally you acknowledge how miserable you actually are. Because if you don't acknowledge that, then there's no help for you anyways. Like now I'm only making you feel less miserable, which is like, there's no sustainability there. Then you just go to, I'll say the same as you, go to the psychiatrist. They'll help you manage misery. Like I'm looking forward to you saying, wow, I am screwed. This is shitty. And then fully embrace that, because that's the first time we can actually move into this joyous embracing what life could look like. But You know, in America, I know that going to the negative is very, very discouraged. Like, why would I've often said, why do you go there? Why would you? And even when I'm working with big companies, and then I invite people to speak poorly about whatever their experience may have been. Like, I see the CEO or the director will look at me like, Andy, hold on. Why are you allowing them to say these things? I'm like, yeah, because if they don't say those things, then you're not going to go anywhere anyway. So get it on the table, let them feel heard, let them grieve whatever they need to grieve, and then we can move. But yeah, it's really,
we don't do honesty. We don't do honesty in our communication. We do tap dancing, we do negotiation, and we do spying. You know what?
It's so important not to skip that, right?
Yeah.
By the way, I saw that you're
many people indeed, like I notice it also in myself, but also in my clients every time that we try to forgive too quickly. Like we don't always own the victimhood because we feel like being a victim is such a bad thing. Like there are so many negative labels on being weak, being a victim. We judge it most of the time, and when that judgment happens, then we try to forgive and not to feel resentful anymore and all that. But it's not really coming from a real place. It's it's just a coping. It's just a ignorance, and it's indeed very important to own that victimhood first, and then it can come to another place where you can cry about it, and then
we can't afford denial anymore. We can't afford it. You know, it's just a waste of time because it's sweeping under the rug. And you know what I've learned from living in Thailand and working with all types of high-tech health tools. You know, there's technology that you can put a little clip on your ear and you can get a biofeedback reading of your mental, emotional, and physical states. It can look at dis-ease. You can look at the heartbreak in your heart and what's going on there and your thoughts that got you there. So it's like boom, boom, boom. And it's like, you know, I can show it to you and go, oh, got a broken heart, huh? You're worrying too much, huh? It's causing your heart problems. And so when you can see it that clearly, you know, why deny? You know, but we don't connect the dots to our physical. And that's the dangerous part. And you know, because we're denying it or we're shamed out of the communication, you know, we can't afford that. We gotta come clean for us.
It's not rational enough for the Western mind. We need to have a clear argument that makes sense, and at least the way we've taught how to make sense. By the way, we have about 3 more minutes left with you. And I'd love, by the way, I could probably obviously go on for another hour. But my question would be, how would you like to spend those 3 minutes?
Well, let me tell you what's next for me. And I really need to interview you next because I am on my transitioning out this third dimensional life. This clean cut look is from my 4th time with cancer, and I've had a couple things happen to me. So it's like, okay, yeah, you're done. And so I'm like, what's next? And I'm grateful to be a geek and a researcher because I'm not going to go back and go, well, I'm just going to lay down and die and see what happens. I'm like, I'm going to look this shit up because what do I need to know next? And so I'm doing my final podcast on Saturday about conscious dying tips. And I've done the work for other people just on the practical. Okay, you know, you got to get the pads and the pain and dealing with these steps going down, write those last letters, clean out. But what I've learned through this experience is about the emotional world that we live in here and how beautiful it is to be human and the power we have not accessed. But I've also learned there's dimensions of this. You know, when I read this mathematical book about the 12 dimensions of humanity, I got to chapter 8th dimension and I went above my pay grade.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that. And I went, there's a lot more for us to know. And I am so looking forward to that and what's next. So, you know, as I said, I may do another interview because there is also technology using voice over internet, kind of like this thing where folks on the other side are talking. So we may do another interview. I'm on the other side, y'all.
Yeah. Well, on Monday we have this woman, Delissa Hawking, who is a psychic in Las Vegas. She does a show in Las Vegas on the Strip, where she just does readings the whole show in front of an audience.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to just checking it out because there's just so much more. Wow. And again, ignorance is not our friend, and it is not bliss. And we have a full, the matrix to teach me this is that it is a game we all get to play. And every time we open our eyes, it's game on. And we create the realities we want. And so I don't intend to close my eyes. I just intend to, I don't call it dying. I call it really labor for the next level. And so off we go. Oh, look at you pulling up Matrix. You got the green screen, cool thing. Can I share the cover of my book?
Please do. Please do. We want to see it.
I can do this.
I can probably do it.
Also,
I got it.
We need the link for your podcast, so
we can put that in the
comments. People can
owning masculinity. Is that it?
Right there? It is at the bottom. If you can pull it up.
Oh my God, I can do that. Wow, I didn't even know I could do what you just did. That's incredible.
Right.
Masculinity.
Right.
Sexual abuse of the masculine.
Right. And I'm very pleased. I mean, my 8th book, and it became a bestseller. And I was like, and I won't even see the income. I'll be dead before I see the movie or the money. I'm just kind of laughing at that. I'm like,
I think it's a pretty damn good movie. I mean, if we went through the nun to the dominatrix, that I can already see the movie in my head. This is fantastic. First of all, I just want to let you know I love you.
In Lakesh, brother.
When I did this happened, 2 weeks ago, and the whole idea was like, wow, I get to spend time with people I like and people I like. It was sort of like weird, like how incredible is it that I get to take time that I would otherwise, I don't know what I would do with, but create a situation where I can just be with people that I love and appreciate. And then it was so weird. It was like, oh yeah, if I do this, I have a reason to like say, Phyllis, let's get on a call,
Yeah, that was fun.
And so thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna pull up the.
And while you're doing that, I'd like to thank Mariana who's come on, because she was called a few hours ago when I said Bambos isn't going to be here. Would you be willing to join?
Yeah, it was very spontaneous. So it was amazing to be here, and it was so.
I know, sister.
You. It was just a pleasure.
You got it going on, Mama. You got it going on. So keep doing what you're doing.
This is the Conscious Dined, which is on April. In 2 days, actually, we're talking Saturday night.
Saturday afternoon, 3:00 my time.
And CST, that's what time?
Central Standard Time. I'm still dealing with Americans, so Central Standard Time.
I'm just trying to convert that. I'm trying to convert that into my time in the Netherlands. Is that 9:00 our time? Are you 6 hours behind or 7 hours? No, it's 6 hours in New York. So I think it would be 10:00. 10:00 our time. Yeah. Okay. I believe we'll have to. Please don't take my word for it.
Oh, it's recorded.
Picture. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. I know. Is that a beautiful artist? It's the canary singing. I've always kind of called myself, I'm the canary in the coal mine for surviving cancer 3 times. And my sensitivities have made me travel around the world avoiding pesticides. But now the canary gets to sing. And so I'm going to sing what I think is most important for people to know. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. There's so much more. Looking forward to it. So thank you so much. This is just a gift to.
Yeah. Utter gift to be with you.
What fun and what fun.
Yeah.
All right. We'll go out and have some great sex.
We will. Not with each other, but we will.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.